Hello there, people of the internet. I have been absolutely foaming at the mouth to get my hands on one of these. Well, boy oh boy, I got the chance to. I decided to go ahead and jump on it. Royal Tiger Imports, that's where this right here came from. It has definitely seen better days, but honestly, at the price point I got it at, I am not going to complain at all. So if you don't recognize what this is a Lee Metford. The Lee Metford is kind of the grandfather to the Lee Enfield. As a matter of fact, I just so happen to have one right here from a previous video that I was doing. This is the Lee Enfield. This particular case, number 1 Mark III, I believe star. Yep, star. Number 1 Mark III star. The actions on these rifles are going to be the same, but there's definitely quite a few differences with them as well. The main difference between the Lee Enfield and the Lee Metford is the rifling inside of the barrel. The Metford rifling is designed basically with the premise of black powder. It was designed kind of around that aspect of keeping the bore nice and clean because the Lee Metford rifling is not as deep or finely contoured as more traditional rifling would be, like the Lee Enfield. That's kind of the premise behind the Lee Metford rifling. It was discovered that the rifling does not last very long with smokeless powder, which is not very surprising at all. The Lee Metford is a smokeless powder rifle, though just because of that Metford rifling, I'm probably just going to fire black powder 303 through this thing, especially because I make my own black powder, and that would mean that I can load it 303 British for not a lot of money. Versus something like the Enfield rifling, which very much has proven itself to stand up to the test of time with this smokeless powder ammunition. So having a look at the Metford versus the Enfield, the first thing I noticed is that there's no charging bridge on this thing, like for stripper clips. On something like the Enfield, there is this bridge for stripper clips that is over top of your receiver, which you can shove rounds into. Now that I have a Metford and an Enfield side by side, I'm realizing just how similar these two rifles are. We are missing the dust cover on our Lee Metford rifle, but that's fine considering where this came from and how old it is. We have no markings on the receiver other than this right here. That is a marking that says SSACO. I'm not sure what that means, so I'm sure somebody in the comments below will be able to tell me. The action on this seems to function. Firing pin's not broke. I'm sure if I took this out and actually shot it, it would actually go bang. I'm not going to dry fire it because I'm not sure of the condition of that firing pin. But pull the trigger, we can see that our sear does drop, so that means it is functional. We are missing our magazine cutoff. I'm going to see if I can hunt one of those down because I've always wanted an Enfield with a magazine cutoff. We actually have a rear sight on this thing, which is fantastic. Not much bluing on the metal, but I really don't care about that. And if we look at the front, we will see it actually has, despite the fact that it is a carbine length rifle, carbine, however it is you feel like pronouncing that, it actually has a rifle nose cap on it. So I'm not entirely sure what the story behind this Enfield is. We got some different things going on with this. I think that this right here is a Metford. I think I called it an Enfield earlier. I think that this is a Metford Mark II, potentially a Mark II Star, that has been cut down to carbine length, because this right here is not indicative of what you would see on a Metford carbine. So at some point in its life, I think that it was just cut a little bit shorter, and that's what we're looking at here. We have no ramrod on this thing, and we have no space for a ramrod on this thing, so it is definitely a later production Metford. We have a full-on sling swivel here, so normally, I can't quite remember what mark they swapped this out for, but it would have like a sling swivel and a stacking rod on it, or a stacking swivel on it at one of those points. I think that they swapped it out for just a regular old sling swivel. Over here, we should have a sling swivel right here, but instead we have one here on the buttstock itself, which is another indicator that this is a cut-down long rifle. The sights on this thing, they've seen better days. There's no spring tension holding this thing on anymore. Hopefully that hits the point of aim because I don't have a means to be able to adjust that. Front sight, we do have our front sight post versus like the V-notch front sight that your early Metfords have, which also tells me that this right here is going to be a later pattern. The inside rifling of this, just because it is very shallow, a lot of people look at that, they think the rifle's completely shot out, and that's what RTI said, but I looked in there and the Metford rifling actually looks pretty gosh darn good for Metford rifling. This does have a double stack magazine inside of it, and it is a 10-round magazine, which also tells me this is a cut down long rifle versus a carbine, because the carbines actually had a 6-round magazine, and it was cut a little bit shorter. So that's pretty much all I can piece together with this thing. We do have this right here, and this is a safety that was found on the carbines from this time period. And I think that with this safety, because this was not on your Metfords for very long, I think that with this safety right here, that would date this rifle at about 1895, whenever they were being made with this carbine style safety. So I think this is a long rifle with a carbine style safety that was cut down into a carbine length rifle at some point in its time. Now, this safety does not necessarily line up with this nose cap, so I think at some point in time somebody replaced this nose cap as well. But this is all just speculation. I mean, this rifle's 100-something years old. Who knows what happened with it down the line. Glad to have it in my collection. The inside of it seems fairly clean in comparison to other things I've gotten from RTI. I don't see any crap or debris inside of the chamber. The barrel actually doesn't have anything really going on with it. The end of the bore is worn out, which makes sense, this being a rifle from Ethiopia. And considering that it is already designed to get worn out from, well, not already designed, but the design already gets worn out very quickly from smokeless powder, or in this particular case, probably cordite ammunition that was fired through this thing, considering the time period where this was being used. So I'm not surprised to see the end of the bore wore out. I'll just counterbore it, and we got plenty of rifling left over inside of this thing. If you look right here, we're going to see a bunch of markings. I'm not sure how well these markings are going to pop up on camera, but it says nitro-proofed, which probably tells me that's a proof just to prove that it can take cordite. And then we got, this says 303, and a bunch of different little proof marks that I have no idea what they mean. So, there we go. There is my Lee Metford rifle. I keep trying to call this thing a Lee Enfield, but it's not. I would like to get myself a dust cover, make this thing a little bit more complete. But here we go. That is the Lee Metford rifle that has officially joined the ranks of my collection. I don't have much of anything else to add, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the outro, I guess. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.